The date was November 15th, 2019, the day that Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order released into the world. An amazing game, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. But the lead up to it is something I first want to talk about, and it actually wasn't all as glamorous as maybe some people think it was. When this game was first revealed, there was a lot of skepticism. Well, firstly, we were in an era of just not very consistent, or even you could argue good Star Wars games. Now, Respawn was always a studio people highly looked up to, but obviously them doing a Star Wars game, we didn't really know. Now, the first trailer was shown back off in April 13th of 2019, and it was met with pretty much overwhelming positivity, but it was also kind of uncertain of what kind of game this was going to be. Nobody really knew, because the trailer, of course, was a CG trailer. We'll skip ahead just a few months to the first gameplay reveal, and we go to Kashyyyk, and we go to Saw Gerrera, and that was the first reveal of what the game would actually look like and how it would actually play. And that's when people were thinking, oh my god, this isn't even close to what we thought this game was going to be, mainly because that first trailer really didn't show all that much off, right? So now we finally get to see what the game looks like, and overall, I would say people were generally on board. Again, we're still in an era of, kind of uncertainty with Star Wars products. The game comes out November, and it is outrageously good. People really like it. I really liked it. It's one of the best Star Wars games, I believe, of all time. I don't know if it's my personal favorite. You could argue in certain technical levels, it probably is the best Star Wars game ever created, and then in other ways, maybe it's not. So we're going to look at this game, having played it just now. It's technically, of course, this video is being released into the world in 2023, but when I played it, it was very late 2022. So take the title with, a grain of salt or whatever you want to do. This game is still really, really good. In some ways, it's actually better than I thought it was back in 2019. Now, I looked at it with a more analytical mind, let's say. This time I was basically looking for specifics. Let's see how these certain things work in this game to kind of do a critique, like retrospective like video. And so here we go. I still think this game is incredibly good. I think the story is actually, it's an odd kind of story because it's very, very simple. If you just go through the story, it really isn't that long. The game, I feel like, kind of expects you to do other things, which I did both times. This time I would say I did almost more, although I did New Game Plus, so all of my, the collectibles that you find throughout the world, they carry over. So when going through it this time, in some ways, like, I took out enemies that I didn't take out the first time, but also I didn't have to explore as much because I got maybe 50-60% of the collectibles the first time, so I didn't have to do it this time. So the game is actually relatively short, and I will say I don't really mind that. Now, I do think the ending cutscene specifically is very rushed. In fact, Respawn, some of the higher-ups there went on record after the game had come out to say they were actually rushed, specifically with the ending, because although we're living in a world where games should come out when they're ready to, not because of forced deadlines, there was a forced deadline. They were trying to get this game out. I believe the goal was to get this game out before the final Star Wars Episode 9, which released just a month after it. So they were under a deadline. You can kind of tell. The last mission is outrageously good, but the final cutscene is like, all right, we're going to decide this holocron fate in a split second, and then we're going to be done. We're going to look at each other and say, hey, what's next? And we're going to fade to black and roll the credits. And it just felt very rushed. But beyond that, the story is condensed. There's not a lot of fluff. You are repeating planets, right? You're going back to certain planets, but it's all very succinct and I think very well told. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't try to be a 15, 20-hour story if it can't, and it can't, so it's not going to try. Now, Jedi Survivor, bigger and better, right? Sequels are supposed to do things like that, or that's the idea with a sequel, so maybe Jedi Survivor will be, even longer. I assume it actually will. But for Fallen Order, I think it perfectly fell where it was supposed to. And then the story itself, let's talk about kind of individual parts here. So if you look at just the beginning, I think the beginning of this game is one of the best Star Wars sequences of all time. I absolutely adore the beginning. It's very agile. Cal is moving all over the place. You're in high locations. You're developing characters already. You're getting basically an emotional death right off the jump. You're introducing your gang of characters right off the jump. It is really well done. on. And that's something that I kind of forgot, just how good the beginning, the first, say, hour of the game is. It slows down after that for sure. Definitely slows down. But what this game actually does, I would say, really, really well, because it's not overly long, is it allows itself to have some moments of calm, moments where it's not as high intensity as other points, and then you can nail people with specific high octane kind of scenes. And now whether those are cutscenes, whether those are boss battles, which I would say are really well scattered out throughout the game. Some boss fights you fight to lose, right? You don't actually win at the end of the boss fight. Some of them you do win. Some of them leads to a cutscene in which you win, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the game goes, and they put different bosses in different worlds. They have their story purposes. They sometimes introduce brand new characters that go into your group towards the end of the game, let's say, right? So they do a really good job, I would say, overall, of pacing. The pace of this game, I do think, is extremely good, because while, when you have gigantic, huge moments like, say, the beginning, and then you follow it with a little bit of, not so much high-octane action, the contrast is quite big. But you need those kind of moments. And I do believe that, like, after, specifically once you go through this game and you start to fight some of these bosses and you die and you die and you die, and then you get good and then you realize how you're supposed to do it, then you feel really accomplished. You kind of do, your hands are shaking, you're sweating, whatever your personal case may be. Not saying that happened to me, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. You need those moments of levity, of, not much going on, to kind of reset yourself. And I think this game does it extremely, extremely well. The Order 66 scene, I actually tweeted this on my Twitter. It is, without a doubt, I would say, well, it's definitely peak Star Wars. I don't know if it's the greatest Star Wars scene of all time, but it is incredible from start to finish. The emotion that you have with your Jedi Master through mainly just flashbacks, like the most you get of him are actually, except for just one specific sequence, which is kind of like a ghost thing, is just all flashbacks, and yet you care. And so when he dies, you care. And just the music, they do the actual Star Wars music. There's a lot of, I would say, originality in the soundtrack in this game, which is really good. I won't lie, though. I think for Star Wars in general, the nostalgia does hit always the strongest. So when you have some of the iconic scores of the movies during these iconic scenes you remember from the movies, like the Order 66 entire, score, it just sounds so good when you're running through the halls and the clones have betrayed you, and Cal can't believe it. Cal's kind of wrestling with it, and I love it. I think Cal in general is also a really, really good character. I think he has a lot of room to grow. I don't think he's perfect. I think actually also he's kind of flawed, and I also like, again, we've talked about something like Amicia in A Plague Tale Requiem. I like characters that fail, characters that need help, characters that don't get it right on the first try. That's called character development. And so many things in modern Hollywood and games just assume that, well, the character's going to be perfect just because, and don't question it. It just is how it's supposed to be. I don't like that. That's not how I roll. And so Cal, I think, fits that bill where he does need help. The whole Star Wars idea generally does help, right? Because you're an apprentice, you need to be taught, you need to learn new things. And I also really like the idea of him remembering. So basically the entire game is a lot of the skill, and this can be done wrong, right? This actually can be done very wrong. But the skills that you learn in Jedi Fallen Order, by even the end of the game, if you think about it, he knew like 5 years ago as a youngling, as a apprentice, he knew those already. He kind of blocked it out of his mind, and he's relearning it. And in terms of a storytelling, a way of doing that, you can mess that up. He's just like, oh, wow. And that's actually, again, why I think Survivor has so much potential is, okay, he basically relearned the things he knew 5 years ago anyway. You know what I mean? Like, not much has changed there. So now you have the opportunity to learn literally brand new things through whoever you want to learn. But I do think it was done really well. The idea that every so often, again, the pacing, the spacing things out with bosses, with getting the double-bladed lightsaber, right? They're always kind of adding something to the experience, and maybe it's a force power. Maybe it's literally the idea that you can now double jump, right? You don't have that in the beginning. You learn that. I guess you relearn it. I actually think it was done extremely, extremely well. Again, the story, I would say specifically the ending, the holocron thing, I like the whole setup for the holocron. I think it's a very basic and very simple idea where, hey, there's a temple and there's a holocron and it has the force-sensitive children and we need to get it. We need to get it before the bad guys get it, and then they steal it and then you have to go get it back. That That's the point of the game. The entire game is based off that, and I think that's honestly fine. How you end that, he was playing around, and I actually really like that flashback. Well, kind of like dream sequence, let's say, right? Where he realizes, hey, if we go get these children and we teach them, the Empire is going to be after them. And that is a amazing sequence. It's not as good as, and it's in similar ways to the Order 66 scene. The Order 66 scene is just peak Star Wars. This other one is still extremely good, and he's wrestling with it, right? Because, well, you could let the children not be found. If the Empire finds them, you're done for anyway. But if you find them, you're really putting them in danger. So he is wrestling with it. They didn't just kind of pull it out of their hat at the end when he, destroys the holocron. But at the same time, I would have liked a little bit more, maybe for it to not even happen in the ship, maybe somewhere else. I just felt like that overall was rushed. But again, they said that. They said that, the ending overall was rushed. And I don't assume they mean like Darth Vader, which was incredible. I like the second sister. I like Trilla. I like fighting her. I like her character. I like the backstory with her. I like the backstory actually with pretty much everybody. And then when Darth Vader just shows up, I mean, it is one of the coolest moments because, we've seen Darth Vader so often, but it really is like an iconic entrance, let's say. It's something that I guess you don't expect to see coming. I'll tell you, when I first played this game, I did not expect that at all. And once you start to hear the breathing, you see the fog in the background, that's like, oh dear God, are they going to actually do it? And then he comes down. And I like how overpowered they make him because that's how he should be, right? You cannot beat him. You need the help of BD1, who, by the way, also is a great character. And you escape. The whole goal is you have to escape because there's no way you're going to be able to take Darth Vader on, which I think is really well done. So characters, I'd say, are all very, very high quality. Even the relationship Cal has with BD1, some of the jokes that they tell back and forth, just in random gameplay, I think is extremely good. The story, I'd say, is overall extremely good. The boss fights. But when we mention boss fights, of course, we have to talk about the last element of this game, which is the combat and the gameplay. This is the bread and butter, I think, of Fallen Order. It's not for everybody. This is a Souls-born game as Star Wars. And this is what I was talking about in the very beginning where, when you first see the trailer, I don't think anybody could actually have predicted. And I guess even if you watch the first gameplay trailer, I don't know if we could have fully gotten the grasp of what the entire game is. It really is a Souls-born game where the checkpoints are spaced out quite aggressively, where you are going to have to go through several enemies to get to the next checkpoint. And then when you do, you'll have your skill points. You'll lose your skill points. If you die, you'll have to go back and hit that enemy to get them back. You will regain your health there. But also, if you rest, if you get your health back at a save point, you will reset all of the enemies in the entire map. And that is not something you would necessarily expect from a Star Wars game, but it makes it challenging. It makes it feel, I would say, very fulfilling to be a Jedi. In terms of even the smaller elements, even holding the lightsaber and swinging it, the kind of power and torque that he has on a lightsaber is awesome. It feels real. When he has a double-bladed lightsaber, I love how he turns it very martial arts-like, very much how you would actually handle a long, like a stick, a bow staff, and something like that in martial arts. That's how you would do it. So I think it's true to form. It's true to how it should look. And in terms of also, I would say, without a doubt, feeling better than I think I thought it felt, right? The story, I think, was pretty much equal. The characters, I think I have a newfound respect for. The combat, though, and the enemy placement and the bosses and really challenging your mind, I think this game is better now than it was back then. Back then, you're just kind of going in blind. You don't really know what to expect, and you're getting destroyed. For myself, some of the hardest, especially towards the end of the game, some of those boss fights, I died like 20, 30 times. This time, maybe like 3, 4, 5 times. I was much, much better this time than I was a few years ago. And it's because I was ready for it firstly, but also you learn they have set patterns that you have to detect, and you have to dodge at the right time. You have to parry at the right time. You have to block at the right time. You have to kind of manage your force. You have to obviously manage your health. You have to know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to die and you're not going to get through this game. And for that, again, the game is not for everybody because it's way more challenging than I think a lot of people, including even myself, thought it was going to be. But I do think it is extremely well done, and this is a Soulsborne game just put into Star Wars. Enemies respawn, enemies are tough, they have their own set patterns, and also just the fact that they managed to do that, by the way, with Star Wars, right? Like have your enemies with the shock sticks, and those are kind of like hand-to-hand combat, but then you have ranged people, you have rocket launcher, you have the droids, the security droids, like you have all these classes of characters. And, like, it works really well. And it's also pretty believable that the Empire would have these, or even if they're creatures, right, and they're, like, in the swamplands, like, it makes sense why there's so many, and they are where they are. So, newfound appreciation, I would definitely say, for the combat. I really have nothing like, there are some very frustrating moments, but a lot of it is caused by myself, caused by me as a player. I will say this. In terms of some of the rough around the edges kind of things with this game, also newfound, like, I focused because, again, I was going into it to critique it and to praise it where I felt necessary. And some of the things I noticed this time around, some of the textures I think are really not great at all. Now, I did play on the PS5 upgrade, so I have the game on PS4, so I got the upgrade to PS5. Some of the textures, not good. You know how much I love water. The water in this game is pretty bad, specifically like the cutscenes. There's a scene early on in the game where Cal falls into the water and it makes like the ripples, and it looks god-awful. So there are some specifically visuals, and we'll talk about the other things in a second. Some of the visuals in this game are not good. They are rough around the edges. Some of them look incredible. The main, like, the set piece moments in this game look insane and look like it could be straight out of a movie. Okay, I'm not dissing that, but some of the more, finer details in this game definitely could have used a couple more months. And again, those are actually the things I hope Survivor fixes, because those are some of the only issues I have with this game. Another thing is also the camera, along with like locking on. So there are times, or there were times where I died, whether it be groups of higher powered enemies or bosses, where it's definitely my fault, right? I got cocky. There's always that cockiness factor, right? Where you do a move, you're trying to gain that one extra hit on the enemy. You know you shouldn't do it. If it backfires, you're going to die, but you're going to try it anyway, right? Those things are you as the player. That's the mess up there. But there's also times where the camera gets extremely odd and it doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. There's also times where the lock-on system is atrociously bad, where you can hit the R3 is the button to lock on, and then you move the analog to switch enemies, and it just will flat out refuse to work. Like, it won't do it. So there are those times in the game for sure, with several either bosses or with just enemies, where I do feel like I died thanks to the camera work or thanks to the lock-on. Again, those are things, to be honest, I don't really think I focused on it. Maybe because the first time I played it 3 years ago, it was more, wow, I suck. And I don't normally, I always talk about the From Software games. I don't make it through those games at all. Elden Ring is the only game I actually made it more than, say, 10 hours. So I made it 50 plus hours in Elden Ring. But the rest of them, I made it like 5 or 6. Star Wars is very difficult. I want to give myself a pat on the back for the simple fact that I made it through, because I think a lot of people actually wouldn't make it through because it's a difficult game. And so I think 3 years ago, I probably focused more on, man, I suck. Man, I really got to learn these enemies' attacks because I can't read them right. I'm not parrying at the right time. I'm not dodging at the right time. So I'm not so focused on the camera work and moving the analog to, switch lock-on targets. I'm not really focused on that. Now, I did feel way more confident in my ability. I died significantly less, across the board. And so I think I was able to focus on those finer details, that there are some issues. But beyond that, beyond the sometimes spotty camera work, the targeting, like the lock-on stuff, and then some of the visuals just across the board, this game overall is extreme. Like, it is a game of the year kind of quality game. It is one of the best Star Wars games ever. I would not even fight you on saying it's the best Star Wars game of all time, or it's your favorite Star Wars game of all time. I mean, I really don't even know. Maybe like the first Force Unleashed has a special place in my heart. Battlefront 2, of course, a classic. Like, there's a couple here and there, and Knights of the Old Republic, obviously. But beyond those, I think Fallen Order deserves to be at least in the top 5, and I think, depending on who you are, you could raise it or lower it. But this is an outstanding game, and in a lot of ways, I would say overwhelmingly, because the few does not outweigh the many, I do think this is actually almost a better game now than it was 3 years ago. I definitely respect the game more now. Other things to throw on is this makes me so much more excited having replayed this game, because you kind of remind yourself, oh yeah, they know what they're doing. They know level design, they know fighting mechanics, they know, again, where to place enemies, they know how to write, they know how to do a story, they know how to do complex characters, they know it. This game is outrageously good. I don't give scores, and this isn't even necessarily a review, but if you haven't played this game yet, definitely pick this game up. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.